Good morning, this is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids, and welcome to season 3 and episode number 331 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show here on the Crier Media Network. Yeah, 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 yeah. Boom. I'm your host. The Eager Beaver, pronounce he, him. Hey, Mr. Beaver A, and today recording day is Tuesday, March 5th, 2024, post by election day. Big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, CanadianTarot.com, and the Peppermaster. With me, as always, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. And let's check to see how his mental health is doing today, as I just noticed that the whiteboard that I put up seems to have fallen down.
My mental health. Well, my mental health I think is good. My physical health is terrible right now.
Oh, ooh,
I may have walking pneumonia.
oh no.
I've got to call into telehealth and just waiting to hear back from them. See, give them the symptoms and see what they say. And I might see if I can get in to see my doctor's been trying to get me in. Like keeps calling to say, yeah, we need to get in for a follow-up. I'm like, yeah, no, I hear you. I just been busy. Anyway, yeah.
Ooh, my.
So, yeah, I'm not feeling the best physically, but mentally, I got this giant white dog now, so.
Yes, please tell us. We have a new member of the damn fam.
Yes, we do. Let me see. I got a couple of photos here I'll post. Here's one, and let me just share that so everybody can see. This was her last night when she first got here. And, oops, I'm pressing the wrong button. Let's see here. There we go. When I first got here last night, and
she gets going.
Settled in quite well.
Oh my God, what a cutie.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's that one. Just basically every time Bridget sits down, she gets on top of her and won't let her leave.
Oh.
Yeah. She's quite adorable.
Oh, what a little cutie. And her name is?
Lola.
Yes. So the official pup of the Beaver Lodge.
Yes. American Bulldog and something Argentinian is all I know. We're not exactly sure, but yeah, just a sweetheart. She's quiet. She's hasn't, I wouldn't say barked as much as just sort of yapped to let us know, hey, I got to pee,
Okay.
Other than that, she's really quiet, really well behaved. I mean, she's anxious because she was in a shelter for 4 months and she was abandoned at 3 years of age. So, separation anxiety will definitely play a part. But right now, she's super attached to the two of us, and we've only had her for since 7 o'clock last night. So, yeah, not even 12 hours.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Oh, gee. How did that happen?
Bridget had been talking about getting a dog. And I'm like, baby, I don't have, she goes, well, maybe in the future. I'm like, maybe in the future. I work too much. I can't be a good dog dad. She goes, well, what if I get a dog and you're part of the dog, but we'll keep her at my place and I'll bring her over here. Can I bring her over here? I'm like, yeah, that would be fine. She goes, okay. Went on Humane Society and we just started scrolling through and she goes, what about this one? I go, that's cute, but what about this one here, Lola? I really like her. And she was interested in another dog and then ended up picking Lola in the end. So yeah, she's a sweetheart.
Oh, I can't wait to meet her. You got you got people, kids in the chat going, you sing Lola to her, right?
Not yet, but I will. I will.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Again, everybody in the pre-chat for the show is like, we don't care about the show, just show us the dog.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what, kids? It's twofer for
Yes.
you today because we don't only have Lola, but we have a guest today. As
Our
you
good friend.
may, pardon?
Our good friend.
Yes. As you may have remembered yesterday, we talked that there was a by-election in Durham, and our guest yesterday made it a point to give some special attention to the event on his show. So, Kits and Cubs, returning to the Beaver Lodge, please put your paws up and give a big round of applause, not only for Lola, but for JB of Canadian Politics 101.
How do I follow up a dog? I can't follow up a dog.
No, you can't.
You can't. You can't. It's
Every
impossible.
camera or a stage with children or animals.
Yeah, it was W.C. Fields. W.C.
You
Fields
will
was
always get
famous for that.
upstaged.
Yeah, no, not happening.
How are you, my friend?
Tired. I'm good,
Yeah.
but I'm tired. Long night, but it was.
Yeah, I was watching a little bit of it. Not last night because I was in bed at 8 o'clock. I'm fighting off, I don't know, pneumonia or something. But I was watching a bit of it when I woke up at 4, and I was just scrolling through, different timelines, and I'm like, what are the final results? I'm like, shit.
Not great, but lots to talk about, lots to break down, because I think there's a bigger story here that we need to kind of figure out, right?
Agreed.
So,
All right.
yeah.
So basically, as pretty much everyone expected, the riding remained in Conservative hands. It's not a seat win. It doesn't add to the tally.
No, because they already had that riding.
Yeah, they already had that riding.
Had it for a while.
Yeah, 20 years, I think.
Yeah,
2004.
but it was yeah, it was 25 years or something at least. I was doing the show with James last night, but I had it on in the background, and I was like checking on the side, and it didn't take that long for it to be declared. Javil Jivani won with over 50% of the votes, and more than double the vote of all the other competitors combined. So prepare to never hear the end of it, kids.
Yeah.
For the next 4 months.
Longer than that. Longer than that.
Like this. This is a sign. Pierre is inevitable. Like this. Prepare. It's coming. But JB, over to you.
So a couple things. I went to bed with about half of the polls reporting, and I woke up with it finalized. And the numbers didn't change. He won by about 30 points, which is in line with both what we were anticipating in this by-election, but also what we anticipate in this riding. This riding has been Conservative blue for the better part, like we said, about 20 years. And even then, before that, when it was a part of a bigger riding, it flipped back and forth all the time. So this riding isn't new towards conservatism, right? The challenge is Jamil has a mandate with only 25% of the vote.
Yeah,
25% voter turnout, which is abysmal. I think that's borderline. Like, I'm in the camp that if you don't get 50% of the people voting, you got to do it all over again and keep voting until 50% votes. That's in the camp I'm in, because you can't. What kind of mandate does he have? In my opinion, like 3/4 of the population didn't vote. So that's big in itself. But like we said, this wasn't a surprise. We knew the Conservatives were going to do it. We knew the Conservatives were going to take it. The question was by how much. but I think what's happening here is in your conservative blue safe seats, you're going to see an emboldened Conservative Party because of Pierre Poilievre and his rhetoric. So you're going to see these seats that were going to win by 20 points, win by 30 points, win by 40 points, because they're just it's the crowd or mob mentality, because everyone else is mad at this guy, right? So the mob says, hey, we're going to all vote for him. This isn't the riding that I want to watch. I want to watch a riding like Scarborough Center or Markham or Aurora. These kind of seats that are always toss-ups every year, sit thick and thin. Those are the ridings I want to watch, which we're not going to be able to watch until the general. So, a safe conservative blue seat in Eastern GTA going blue again, not really that big of a story. The story here is 25% of the people voted in a by-election that was heavily advertised, that was heavily deemed as crucial, who the Liberals put up probably the best candidate they could ever put up in this riding.
Somebody who formerly wanted to run for the for the Conservatives under O'Toole, I believe, right?
Yeah, he is the definition of a red Tory. Like, he is a conservative most of the time, but is progressive. So he gets pushed away by the Conservative Party. Right. So again, that's the thing. Like, I think Robert should rerun in the next election for two reasons. One, this riding is getting split in 2025. Because at the next election, a little fun fact, we go from 338 to 343 ridings because Canada's getting bigger. So this riding's actually getting cut in half. So the south part of the riding, the more urban part, your Bowmanvilles, your Claringtons, your outside of Oshawa, is going to be their own riding. And then the other riding at the top is getting merged into the bigger rural riding around it. So Jamil probably won't have a job because this is getting split up in a way that an urban riding is getting created, which will probably vote Liberal, where the rural riding is getting moved into another riding that already exists. So this Jamil's probably not going to have a job in a year, to be honest with you. So he's got a short mandate, but a very weak mandate as well. So I don't know what the purpose of this. The Conservatives know this. They know that this riding is splitting up. And if Robert was smart, he would rerun again in 2025 as that red Tory in a former blue riding and knocked it out of the park. That's my thoughts on that. So.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Interesting. I didn't know that the riding was splitting up. Now, based on what you know or in your knowledge, what is a typical turnout for a by-election? It's still somewhat in the 30s, right?
30 to 40 on
so
a good
25
one.
Is abnormally low.
It is painfully low. I was excited because Elections Canada in the morning released their advanced poll numbers, which was 10,000 votes. It was 10% of the riding voted in advanced polling. Right. So if only 15% more actually voted on election day, that tells me two things. One, the Conservative vote isn't as strong as I think they think it is, because advanced polling is typically favored by more progressive and leftist parties. And the election day voting is more done by Conservatives. So if Conservatives can only really rally 15%, now not every vote's going to be for Conservative, obviously. There's going to be plurality, but in these flip ridings, these ridings, like I said earlier, that can go back and forth and go either way. If on election day they can only really get 10 to 15% of their base, let's just say 10% arguably of their base to show up, that's not going to flip Aurora. That's not going to flip Markham. That's not going to flip Scarborough Center. These critical ridings they need to flip in the 905, they're not going to be able to flip it. They can flip Durham. Well, they didn't need to flip Durham. They already had Durham. Right. But it's on a general, it's obviously a different story. But I think if the Liberals were smart, they would take this as an opportunity to see that we can rally the vote. We got 10,000 people to vote in advance voting. That's huge, right? And when we saw the advanced poll dump come in right at the end, we saw the Liberal vote increase a little bit. So we know that this is the case. It's just it's such a conservative riding. It's hard to analyze what the voting trend is because we knew this was going to happen anyways, right? So
it's not a surprise at all, right?
No. How much of it the low enthusiasm do you think, because playing devil's advocate, could be just by virtue of the fact, well, it was a foregone conclusion, so we didn't come.
There's that
Versus
factor as well.
that there's no enthusiasm for him.
Yeah, there is a spoiler effect when it's a riding that's a former conservative leader's riding or former party leader's riding. Like, it's like the day Justin Trudeau moves on to whatever else he's going to do, Papineau in Montreal is going to still probably vote Liberal, and it's probably going to be some shoe-in candidate that they're just going to fill his spot with, right? It's not anything shocking out of the ordinary. The concerning thing is that Aaron O'Toole was not endorsing Javil Jivani, but saying he's a good guy, but not actually straight up endorsing him. He didn't endorse anybody for the race, right? So that was the big question mark. Is you have this conservative liberal candidate, this progressive conservative that flipped liberal running. Are they going to be able to make a dent? And if you look at the progressive vote, they did. The NDP tanked. This was an abysmal performance for the NDP, like absolutely abysmal. And it shows time and time again that when there's a strong liberal candidate in a riding, it's at the expense of the NDP. Like, that's what it is. And the big question is, can you get a candidate that can pull that NDP vote, but also pull that conservative vote away? Oh, well, that's a happy little break.
Sorry, guys. She really likes the attention.
No, I get it.
Oh, she's so cute.
Yeah, I want to say, I really wish this by-election was in their neighboring riding of like Pickering or Ajax, because it would be a little bit more telling of where the more urban vote's going and the suburban vote. I live in suburban 905. I'm in one of those ridings that can go either way, right? And I can tell you in my community, which I'm not going to say where, but my community, it's very much divided. Like, I have a conservative guy that lives beside me, and I have a liberal that lives beside me, and then there's me, the progressive, in the between, being like, whoa. Like, this is like could go either way, and that's the case on any street corner in my town, right? So we'll see.
I'm comparing the general election. I mean, I know that this is not a strict comparison, but comparing the general election numbers to the by-election. And you're right. In the general election, the New Democrats got 17.5% of the vote, and here they just got 10.4. So, but I'm watching the Liberals had 29.92, basically 30 for all intents and purposes, and got 22.5. So it's a similar drop. And Aaron O'Toole had 46.39, and Javil Jivani got 57. So So in the by-election, he outperformed O'Toole. So as you mentioned, there was a riding that was already conservative was more enthusiastic.
Yeah, but when you think about it, sorry to interrupt.
In that sense, in terms of the share of the vote, but then again, you have to add the turnout effect.
The turnout effect, but also if you add the progressive vote together, if you want to call the Liberals progressive, which for argument's sake we will, when you add that together, it wasn't really that big of a margin. It was still about 10 points, but 10 points is a big different story than 30 points, right? So there is a spoiler effect for sure. There is, Robert Rock's momentum was stunted by the 10% that the NDP got. Where if it was between the Conservatives and the NDP for actual viability, and I'm saying this as a New Democrat, so like I'm criticizing my own party here, that the NDP needs to take the L in a lot of these ridings where they are not contending and actually causing the Conservative to win. But on the flip side, I think the Liberals need to take the L and bow out of ridings where the NDP is in contention. These really urban ridings that could like Toronto St. Paul. Liberal riding ever since it's existed is statistically tied between the Liberal and the Conservative right now because they're fielding an amazing NDP candidate, right? So it's like, whoa, guys, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot here. Is the two progressives are going to battle it out for that progressive vote, but then the Conservatives going to sit there unopposed, going, "Oh, I'll just take it then." And then you got Toronto St. Paul going Conservative for the first time in a long time. So. It's the vote split is a different argument and a whole different ball of wax that could be its own episode. But alas,
for that to happen, however, then there needs to be an agreement, within the parties, almost like non-aggression pacts and certain ridings. Like, I know that out west, for example, a lot of the battles are conservative NDP, not necessarily conservative Liberal. And when you get to the other side of the Manitoba border, it seems to flip.
Yeah.
But there never seems to be, I have yet to see in my lifetime. Let's put it this way. The confidence and supply agreement that was there was the first time I actually proactively saw Liberals and New Democrats trying to work together over a sustained period in my entire lifetime. I was having a discussion with James yesterday. It seems that the New Democrats' political strategy is to try to replace the Liberals in the minds of Canadians as Canada's progressive option. The problem is that Liberals are the national governing party, and the New Democrats never think of the possibility of trying to replace the Conservatives as Canada's government-in-waiting option.
Yeah, and I think too,
It doesn't seem that there's any likelihood that the New Democrats. I know that they're two
viable.
different parties. They're two different. They're not viable, maybe, but they're two different parties, and never the twain shall meet. And and they stand for different things. But it just doesn't seem that there's ever been any will from either the Liberal side or the New Democrat side to actually unite the left, not in terms of a merger of parties, but because I don't think the membership would stand for that, but at least in a non-aggression type way to make sure that at least, for example, after working so hard to have put dental care into place and starting pharmacare and getting the anti-scab legislation and everything else that was in the deal, it would be kind of silly, in my mind, for the New Democrats to then go into the next election bashing Liberals left, right, and center,
But they
helping
will.
the Conservatives to win. So all those things that they worked for just get taken away or vanish. I mean, if you care about the programs and the policy more than you care about defeating the other guy, then you do that. But in elections are about winning. So I know academically we talk, it's like if they could just come to some agreement, we would never have conservative government again. But it just seems that there's never been a will, or nobody even bothering to whisper it out loud to see maybe put the finger up in the air and see if there's a desire.
Well, let's look at the last election in Ontario, where basically the Liberals and the NDP were fighting each other instead of fighting the guy who was governing, who was,
and handed him a majority.
Yeah,
I
literally did.
I did an analysis.
And then now both of them are working for him.
Yeah.
Right. And I did an analysis on my channel about this way back in the oh my God, it felt so long ago. But in the last Ontario election, went through riding by riding by riding and added up the progressive vote. And I took 20% off, 10% off just because. Because eventually, if you merge the parties, there's going to be a subsect of that group that says, no go, I'm out. And then they go somewhere else. Right. And if they did that, the Conservatives would have lost. It would have been a whatever that party's called. It would have been their minority to take.
Absolutely.
So it's frustrating as a progressive and as a New Democrat. I say this at party conventions when I go. I say this to leaders. I say this to everybody involved in New Democrats. Post Jack Layton, this party is a ship without a sail. We are just shipping in this big ocean, trying to gather what votes we can, with an amazing message of pharmacare and dental care and anti-scab, all the things that I, as a progressive, I'm very passionate about. And as you say, the supply and confidence agreement was I smiled in joy at that because I realized I'm going to get pharmacare now, at least in some capacity. I'm going to get dental care in some capacity. I'm going to get these things that, my party's been fighting for. And I was so happy about that. I was excited that it might even turn into a former coalition, right? And a formal coalition. My apologies. But it's frustrating to me when I see Jagmeet Singh, and I've met the dude plenty of times. I've talked to him a lot. His brother and I follow each other. Like I'm close to him, and I've said to him, like, I don't support what you're doing. Like, I voted against him in the leadership review this past convention. I was one of the 11% saying that we need to do a different path forward because what we're doing is not working. And instead of fighting the Liberals, we need to go back to our latent roots and work with the Liberals. Jack Layton never ran an attack ad. Jack Layton never attacked the Liberals. He just said, I'm going to do things differently. And that's how he got his opposition in 2011. And I feel like he would have won in 2015 on that same message. And
Jagmeet is a very nice man. I've met him a couple of times. He's very amiable, very friendly, real easy guy to chat with. But the way the messaging, the way they're running it, it's like, no, he's.
Yeah.
I mean, like just last week, we got you. The liberals are in bed with big pharma, and we got you pharmacare. I'm like, bro, that is not what happened, and you know that.
I would be attacking Pierre or dodging the question if he's going to dismantle pharmacare. That's
Yeah.
what you attack,
Right?
right? That's what you attack. Pierre held a press conference the day I talked about this on my channel.
Mhm.
The day the pharmacare was being tabled,
Yep.
he held that stupid press conference talking about some scandal that's not a scandal.
It's not a scam.
Yeah.
And then what do the liberals come out in the defense, which they did in the
Mhm.
right. Justin Trudeau was in Thunder Bay, but he did make a statement saying this is bullshit, this is nothing, like yada yada yada. But what did Jagmeet Singh do? He went on Twitter and made a video about how the liberals are trying to stop this. It's like, no, they're not. They're literally tabling it. Like, it's so frustrating as
It's
a
like they
paid
work with you to make it
member.
happen, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't
But at the
know.
same time as the person that was attributed or assigned to the file from the side of the New Democrats is telling people in the press we're actually making good progress. Jagmeet Singh is out there saying the liberals don't want to do this and they're opposing it. Like literally the messages are mixed because those who
Yeah.
were really following the file, who really cared about this, knew that the NDP MP that was assigned to negotiate on behalf of the party was saying all along that good progress was being made.
If Jagmeet Singh has any chance of a career post this election, because he's not going to win. We've been seeing it by-election after by-election. The NDP are hurting. And I talked to my fellow New Democrats, some that are MPs, and they're concerned about losing their own riding, right?
Mhm.
And they would be considered what's like an NDP safe seat, which there's not
Right.
many, but they're out there. They're concerned about losing their riding. I think the best thing that they need to prop themselves up for is try to get the best possible showing in 2025 and then knock on Justin Trudeau's door and say, if it's a conservative minority, which I think that's probably what's going to happen,
Mhm.
is saying, how can we form a coalition? How can we stop this conservative mandate? And if they can form a coalition and actually form government from that,
Yeah.
and knock on the governor general's door and say, wait, we got more. We have a coalition, which is perfectly legal, by the way.
Yep.
This is the best chance that Jagmeet Singh has for a career. And I've told him this. I'm like, as a paying New Democrat, as a proud
Mhm.
member since Jack Layton, we need to work together with them and we need to stop fighting them. Maybe someday a merger would look in the horizon. Maybe someday we can work a little bit more formally. But
Mhm.
right now, the biggest threat to women's health, the biggest threat to our healthcare, the biggest threat to Canada right now is that guy that took off his glasses and is yelling in front of the camera,
Yeah.
not each other.
No.
That's kind of the stance I'm in as a New Democrat.
Completely agree with you.
Hmm.
And I was thinking the same thing. They do an end run. Okay, so the Conservatives win a minority, but if we form a coalition, we just go to the Governor General and we'll form government because we actually have more seats in a coalition government.
With 50% of the mandate.
Yeah. So
like that's strong.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's huge. So
If we're talking about the NDP federally, I think it's what they have 26 seats, is it
32.
at the moment?
32.
32.
32.
Yeah, and the biggest concentration of them are in British Columbia
And Hamilton.
Oh yes, that's
and
right.
Hamilton
And
area.
Hamilton, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit in the Hamilton area. And I'm looking at 338.com at the moment, and I'm looking at the seat projection within the province of British Columbia. And there was a time around May 2023 where they were sitting at about 15 seats based on projections. And now they're sitting at 6.
Mm-hmm.
In
Yeah,
the region.
it's I think
when
we
are they
need to
going to
lose.
pick up that what they're doing is not working?
Yeah.
I think we need to devastatingly lose. And I'm saying that as a member, right? Like, I think we need to take the L, kind of like what the Liberals had to do in 2011, so that they clean house, they regroup, and then they come back for a stronger showing. Like, I love my party. I always will. And this is coming from somebody who sometimes feels like a political orphan. I put on Twitter the other day that if I was ever going to run for office, I would do it as an independent, because I wouldn't want to be a part of any of the parties right now. And I'm saying that as a party member, right? I just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But this is the interesting thing. So BC is, polling exponentially for the Conservatives. But if you look at the provincial results, that will show what an aligned left is.
Mhm.
Like Dave Embee, this provincial election this year might get every single seat in British Columbia. every single seat. There's polling simulations that have Dave Eby winning every seat in BC. No other
crazy.
party. Like, so when the left is aligned, look what amazing things. Like, BC is a progressive province.
Yes.
Like, BC is ridiculously progressive. But look what happens with the vote split. The Conservatives are polling 30%, 40% in the running. Like, look, yeah, that's provincial. Like, just like drummed. Like, it's nuts, right? Like it's and like the Conservative Party in BC is fractured right now. So they're in a regroup anyways, but it's like that's what happens, right?
That's the seat projection right there, showing that the NDP is going up and up and up and might pick up 80.
You know how many seats there are in BC? 90.
90. Yeah.
Look at the top projection of that polling prediction.
Yeah. 67 to 90.
Wow.
Like,
that's crazy.
They probably won't get 90, but it's just
that's an
like,
overwhelming
that's the next
majority.
election. That's the next election I'm watching is BC.
That's in October. That's coming.
Yeah, just before the general.
So here's the thing, right? We're looking at a situation where provincially, because Alberta could have gone NDP had not run a stronger campaign. Manitoba did. BC is probably going to stay on the column. And we look at the provincial numbers for Saskatchewan. For the first time in forever, the NDP actually won a poll. Came out first. And in Saskatchewan, the citizens there seem to be particularly upset with the manner in which Scott Moe is handling healthcare. And in Saskatchewan, if there's one place in Canada where healthcare is kind of the thing, it's Saskatchewan, right? Because that's where our national
Except don't order an ambulance in Saskatchewan.
Yeah,
they have ambulances in Saskatchewan.
Sometimes, and they're very expensive. I've heard of people spending $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 for an ambulance ride. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
it's like what in Saskatchewan? They gave us what we have. What's going on there?
Yeah, and that's why you have Scott Moe talking about trans issues again, and having Sask Energy not collect the carbon regulatory fee and whatnot. I mean, the dude is trying what he can, just because clearly the man's in free fall. But there's this dissociation between the provincial NDPs and the federal ones. Like Jagmeet was nowhere to be seen in the Alberta campaign, was nowhere to be seen in the Manitoba campaign.
Or Durham.
In fact, word on the tweet is that he was told, stay away.
In Durham, too. He was not there.
Yeah.
He didn't even show up for the candidate. Like, there was nothing. There was no campaigning. Mart Stiles went to Durham, who's the leader of the Ontario NDP. But she's really not even that popular in itself. So, like, talk about a terrible surrogate to send to a very critical by-election, right? I think a lot of provinces, Ontario in particular, is sort of a reverse bellwether. So whatever the federal level is doing, the provinces tend to do opposite, right? So when we see a liberal government, we tend to see conservative premiers start to pop up. And then when we see a conservative government, we tend to see more liberal premiers pop up. That tends to be the Canadian way, with some exceptions like Alberta and the Maritimes and whatnot. But and Quebec. Can't forget about big Quebec.
Because when Trudeau became prime minister, for a very brief period, most of the provinces were sort of progressive, well, let's say left of center led. And then that's just disappeared. And all of a sudden we had eight provinces that were like ideologically conservative. Now, Manitoba has flipped. There's a chance that New Brunswick might flip. There's a chance that Saskatchewan might flip. And when they start flipping the other way, that's usually a sign that we're going to get a change in the federal government coming.
Well, Ontario, if Bonnie Crombie can pull out a big by-election win in a couple months here in Toronto, and then start to get her campaign, start to get in the legislature, I think Bonnie Crombie will be able to flip Ontario, at least in some capacity. Quebec might be losing the Legault for how long has Legault been in there? Long time.
Yep.
And they might be going to the PQ, which that's a disaster for the conservative government incoming, if there is one. For Quebec to have a PQ government and you are conservative. This is kind of the thing. Like, I don't look forward to the potential of a Pierre Poilievre government. Don't get me wrong. I think that's going to be a disaster. But if all the provinces flip, it might be a little bit of a silver lining here and saying, well, healthcare is going to be protected because you're not going to have Wab Canoe got healthcare.
No,
You're not going to
God, no.
have Bonnie Crombie got healthcare. You're not going to have the PQ got healthcare. You're not going to have Dave Eby got healthcare. If Alberta
Right.
can flip midterm for Pierre, then Alberta's safe. Like, you see what I mean? Saskatchewan might flip. So there might
Yep.
be some benefits to this, right? Yes, Pierre might do shit with immigration and axe the carbon tax and whatnot. But at what expense? Like, if it means we get more left premiers, maybe that's what we need. I don't know. I'm still very confused about what post 2025 looks like for Canada.
Well, that's a good point, because when you think about it, the mess that our healthcare is in, the mess that housing is in, is all provincial jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And
We've been saying it for months now. Our premiers are the
They're the
problem.
problem.
Stop hating on the federal government. Our premiers are the problem.
So, you know, and Skippy will constantly blame Justin Trudeau for things that are not his jurisdiction or responsibility, which is. And then,
I just worry he's going to take the credit. That's the thing.
Yeah. Well, that's it's funny that you mentioned that, because I said that yesterday. Somebody had posted something on Twitter that's saying that the Liberals, federal Liberals, are on track to with the housing accelerator to get 750,000 houses built. Yes, but most of them, if there's a flip, will be built while Pierre Poilievre is prime minister, and he's going to say, "Hey, we did that."
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you didn't. You just happened to be there when it happened.
It's actually quite
All the
strategic.
groundwork was laid before.
It's actually quite strategic, because more than half of them will be built by the time election comes around next year. So,
Okay.
I think that's very smart for the Liberals to make sure that a lot are built before, or at least you're starting to see developments. I said this on my show the other day, where if I drive down my street, there's a housing development that just started about 2 weeks ago. And there's big signs saying Liberal Housing Accelerator Fund, this and that. I'm sure some of them is going to make an appearance in the next couple of weeks, probably on my street, and it's going to be really exciting. But I have no doubt that they're going to be a big press conference of some capacity, right, with them.
Right.
But like I said, I live in one of those ridings. I can go either way, right? So if I'm a voter and I'm driving down my street and I see, oh, there's about 500 homes being built, and there's a big Liberal Accelerator Fund sign out there, and Scott Fraser was here, or Sean Fraser, sorry. Sean Fraser was here, and maybe Trudeau was here. That's big for those flip ridings, right? And
right.
That might flip this riding. That might be the thing, right? And our city council actually just flipped to a more progressive side, which was really exciting. So like, things are switching, right? We're seeing this switch, and it's just tough. It's like, what is the path forward for all these parties? Because you got the provincial catalyst, or you got the provincial spoiler effect. You got the Doug Ford spoiler effect for Pierre, and that's going to screw him. If he loses Ontario, it's at the behest of Doug Ford. Like, that's what it's going to be. So,
and they're not friends.
Nope. They don't get along. From what I'm to understand, from the inner workings I have within the Conservatives, they don't talk. So.
Well, here's something I'd like to ask you, since we have you taking a little step to the right. Considering Pierre Poilievre's most recent tweets, not Pierre Poilievre, sorry, David Parker's most recent tweets about Jenny Byrne and Pierre, there seems to be, the Conservatives seem to have battles a bit on three fronts. The battling with Doug Ford Conservatives. It seems like the UCP has kind of decided that, hey, maybe we're the ones that are running the show of the Conservative movement in Canada, and not so much Pierre. He seems to be a little weak and flip-flopping in a couple of places. So you got that going on. And then, darn, I forgot the thought. I should have written it down what the third front was as soon as I thought of it. But they're fighting on those fronts. The PPC front, of course. Right. So that's relatively new for federal Conservatives, because there was a time not so long ago that they were literally the only game in town, and the provinces were in tow if there was something. Poilievre is walking this fine line, and our theory that we hope pans out is that time is not his friend, because there's only so long you can walk. He's walking a very thin line, because he can't go too far to the right because he loses moderates, unless the time for a change thing is really just that overwhelming, and he can't go too far to the center, because he loses the PPC ones, and the PPC ones it's almost like they need constant validation. There always has to be some type of red meat thrown their way, and if it has been too long, then they start to get antsy.
Yeah.
But there's no way to throw red meat to the PPC without making people more in the middle roll their eyes. So at some point, he can't maintain this for 19 months. I mean, or
he's going to
the
try.
world's best tightrope walker.
Yeah, he'll try. I think he'll
look,
fail.
he may do it. You know, Paul, I agree with Paul that he'll probably will fail. I don't think you're going to see a strong PR showing in 2025. And I will eat my words. You can have me on in a year and a bit when the election's over. And if it's a conservative majority, I'll eat my words. But, and I will openly say that Pierre is probably one of the best conservative campaigners that we saw in a long time. If he can pull out a majority for this long of a campaign, like he's if I know anything about Canadian politics, which I know a little bit, Canadians get exhausted very quickly, right? If there is a long look at the nail in Stephen Harper's coffin in 2015 was he did that super long campaign. He called the longest campaign in Canadian history. He called an election and said, it's months from now. That was the nail in Stephen Harper's coffin because he allowed the other parties to campaign and he got them on the road, right? And the longer there's a campaign for the Liberal candidates, the worse that is for the Conservatives, right? So if Justin Trudeau was smart, which sometimes he is, he will call a super short campaign. When he calls this election in October, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like really short, like make it as short as you possibly can. Because the quicker you can get your message out and then stop the Conservatives in their tracks, that's going to be the big thing. But Pierre has had this long runway. He's been running this runway for a while. And if you know anything about aviation and flying, there's this thing called V1. It is the speed that you have to go to get up in the air, and there's no turning back at V1. And I don't think the Conservatives have hit V1 yet. They're there, they're ramping up to there, but there's going to get to the point where they're going to try to take off, and I don't think they're going to do it. Durham by-election, they're still running. But again, in these other contests that are coming up, as well as the general, it's not looking good for them. Like it's just you can't campaign for 2 years and expect a good result. People are going to get tired. And populism and what PR is, as you kind of mentioned earlier with your 3 points, is prone to collapse. If they're big at pumping up the balloon, they pump it up and pump it up and pump it up, and they look like this big wrecking force that's going to change anything. And maybe they get government. Maybe they form government. But that balloon's going to pop. And when it does, it just explodes. So I don't see a Conservative Party the way it is in about 10 years. I really don't. I think it's going to just implode in itself, and they're going to need a long time to self-realize, was this move to the right thing to do? So.
So, again,
that was a rant.
My prediction is that we're no, please. My prediction is, of course, how is this going to be spun in the media? I know that they're all going to celebrate this. They're all going to say that PR is inevitable. Other than that, what do you see coming
from Durham? I see a future backbencher that was handpicked to this position that is going to just sit in the back and repeat his script over and over again. Because I said this in my live last night. Javil Jivani, as polarizing as a character as he was in the campaign, is boring in the House of Commons. He is a PR loyalist. He's going to sit on that back bench, or maybe he'll get second row because of his experience. And he's just going to repeat, axe the tax, this and that. Look at Arpankana, who's now under CSIS investigation for his appointment in that riding. He stood up in the House the other day and literally was doing this with his paper. Like he was shaking. Like he couldn't finish his speech without stuttering and mixing up his words. And I get it's intimidating to do your first statement of members. I get it. I would be shaking too. But the point is that these people that they're handpicking for these ridings, these safe seats, who are PR loyalists, are just that. They're not going to pass, good legislation. They're not going to propose anything that's there. Or if they do, it's going to be like we talked about last time I was on with that bill, that security clearance bill, that private members bill. Try to get passed. They're going to propose toss-up legislation like that is controversial, unconstitutional and all these different things. And that's what these loyalists are going to do. And as I talked at the start, he's probably not even going to have a job soon because he doesn't have a map. This is getting cut in half.
Yeah.
Right. And this is all progressive. This is what's being merged. Like, he's not going to keep his job. That's the thing. So what is he really going to do? So
another thing I wanted your opinion on, and this is, I think the three of us might be a little idealistic on this one, but it seems that, it's a strategy that's been in place a lot more since Harper came around, but of not debating. It's like I'm watching Javil Jivani put out saying things like, I'm going to fight for you and I'm going to stand for you. It's like, fight for me. You can even like fight against your own leader. When he told you don't debate and keep your mouth shut. You didn't stand up and say, well, wait a minute, the voters have a right to hear me. You just said, okay, boss. And then you just sauntered away. I mean, after he put out that video accusing Justin Trudeau of having called him of being a racist for having said "twofer," I mean, what have we heard from him in this campaign? He kind of vanished after that. So what is this?
It's populism.
What is it with the Canadian voter that does not seem to be upset by candidates saying, you know what? No.
It's not just Canada.
I'm just not going to tell you what my plans are. You don't get to hear from me. I'm running to represent you, but I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do.
It's not just Canada. It's populism. And and this is, I'm talking nonpartisan populism. Populism on both sides. Populists don't debate because they lose in debates. Look at every time Donald Trump has been in a debate, he gets dragged, whether it was Hillary Clinton, whether it was Joe Biden, whether whoever debates him, he gets dragged through the mud. And Pierre, I'm willing to bet a hot loony right now that Pierre is not going to debate in 2025. He's going to bow. He's going to say, I'm not doing it. Yeah. And if we look,
Blanchet will have him for breakfast.
Yeah. Well, not just Blanchet, but Elizabeth May in front of Pierre Poilievre, he's cooked. Like he's done. Like May's. I do not want to debate May. I think I talked about this last time. But in the States, we have Donald Trump not going to debates. In the Republican primary, and I doubt he's going to do one in the general, because his base is already emboldened. He doesn't need to debate. He doesn't need to win voters. He has enough, at least in his mind. And
Pierre
if we look,
he's a master debater.
I mean, maybe with a cold scotch, he might be able to do that. But if we look at the other side, on the left side, I got to go down to Central America, but Bukele in El Salvador, who won his election with 99% of the vote, he got 99% of the vote. He famously didn't debate the other side because he was like, he literally said, I don't need to. I already know I'm going to win. And when we go back in history to Silly Mustache Man, as I like to say, he famously wouldn't debate. Yeah. He famously wouldn't engage in conversation with the other side. He just imprisoned them and put them in concentration camps. Yeah. So it was a little bit different. But my point is like, they don't debate. They just don't. And populism never did. And that's one of the fascinating things about populism is that they break norms. But like I said, it collapses. And when it does, it is spectacular. It's always a crash with fireworks, right? So
trash with fireworks.
I'm funny one time. I get one joke.
Well, this is it's the new one I added in just the other day.
Deadpan was perfect. But I understand the populism side of it. The part that I don't get is why is, other than the couple of political idealists that go, hey, no debate, no vote, it doesn't seem, there doesn't seem to be any consequence. Is it simply because, like I said, where it is they choose not to debate is the places they already know they're going to win, and they do show up at the places where they're not sure? Like, is that the trend, or do they?
Could be.
Because I've noticed, like, as a general policy, sometimes they just don't show up, whether they're winning or losing.
Well, the question I would raise, or the rebuttal I would say, is what is the punishment for not showing up? Nothing.
There doesn't seem to be any.
The Elections Canada there's nothing in the Elections Act that says you have to debate. There's nothing in the local riding associations that say you have to debate. I think there should be. I think there should be. You have to do one You don't have to do all 20 of them at some Legion Hall in some small town, but you can if you want. But I think it should be I think it should be a rule that you have to at least do one, and that should be the case. And when you look at the other populism side of a populism party that's trying to gain traction, if you look at the PPC, they've been begging to get at the debate table because they don't have the votes. They want to get the votes, right? And once they get the votes, if they ever get them, they're never going to show up to debate. It's the whole, like, it's cowardice, in my opinion. I think it's incredibly like, you are meant to represent the people, and you got people that want to take your job or do the same job you do. You should at least sit down at a table and say, hey, let's talk about what I'm going to do. You can push whatever extreme message you want to push. That's the point. You don't have to, you're not trying to, the point of a debate isn't to convince the other person that you're right or wrong. It's to convince the people that are watching. Right. So you can be hard pressed in your views, and that's fine, but you should at least have to show up to one. That's just my thoughts on that. And no parachute candidates. It's the other thing I would change, is you can't.
Yeah. You actually, speaking of that, you taught me something yesterday because I saw pictures of Javil Jivani going, hey, I just voted for myself. And I was like, how the hell did you vote for yourself? You don't even live in the electoral district. So I'm sure a lot of people were wondering that too,
it was a big question.
You had the answer.
Yeah, there is a weird thing in election law that if you are a candidate to run, you could vote in your own election. It makes sense, right? From a, hey, I'm vying to be your candidate. I should at least have a say of who I want. You're obviously going to vote for yourself. Why wouldn't you vote for anybody else? I get the reasoning behind it because, like, if you look at, say, Durham, right? You have Oshawa, which is its own riding, which is close by. Say you have a candidate that lives in urban Oshawa that wants to run in Durham. They would understand the region. They would understand the needs of it, right? So I think they should run. I think it should be a border rule. Either you live in the riding or you border the riding you want to run in. If you live in a riding that's on the other side of town, or like in Toronto's sake, or if you live in another province, you shouldn't be able to parachute in and say, I'm running there. I think that would be a fair rule, because a good example would be actually in Red Deer out in Alberta. The candidate that won Red Deer West actually lived in Red Deer East, and the people in Red Deer West, the candidates there, were saying, no, you don't live in this riding. But they were saying, no, I've lived in Red Deer my entire life. Just because the city is split between two ridings doesn't mean I don't know what Red Deer wants, right? I move across the street, I'm in a different riding. Like, it's not, it's right. So it's a very fine line. But yes, candidates who do not live in the riding who are running can vote in their own election, with their campaign office as the address and the returning office as the voting location. So
there was a thing like that here in the city years ago, where they were talking about how school boards are divided up along lines. So if you're living on one side of the street, you were in one school board, and if you're living on the other side, you're living in a different one. And the disadvantage of that was the kids on the other side of the street had to take a 45-minute bus ride, whereas the kids on one side of the street walked up the street to the school. Yeah. And I'm like, we gotta look at that a little bit better. Like, we got to be more realistic about it.
Where I used to live north of Kingston, you would know this, my friend, living in that area. I lived in an area that was closer to technically the capital region and a beautiful town of Smith Falls. But because I was technically in Limestone, I had to be bussed an hour into the city of Kingston for school.
Which is ridiculous, right?
Which I was 25 minutes from Smith Falls. Like, theoretically, I should be able to go to Smith Falls, but I couldn't. Because
geographically, it makes no sense when they do stuff like that. I mean, it's a waste of time, money, resources. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, my parents were not happy about that.
Oh God,
no. This might be a little bit on the spot for you because you probably don't have the data handy. But one of our listeners asked me to ask you for advice, saying, I'm in Peterborough. Who's the best to work for to attempt to flip the riding in 25, Liberal or NDP? It's a contrarian ride-in, but it's a contrarian riding.
If it's Peterborough Kawartha, you got Michelle Ferrari in there, and she is popular among Peterboroughans. So
why? I don't know.
Well, she was on TV. She was on Checks for so many years. It's like, what's the guy in Kingston? Bill Hutchins, I think, was the long time anchor. If he ran for politics, he would win in a heartbeat because he's been on TV for 40 years, 30 years. I mean, I think it's challenging in those ridings. And I used to live in one of those ridings. I used to live in Randy Hillier's old riding where I grew up. So we want to talk about conservative.
Yeah.
That's like,
Yep.
there's no flipping that riding, right? So my poor father still lives there. He is, you think I'm progressive. You want to know where I get it from? It's from a union dad who worked in a union his entire life. Like, there's a reason I am the way I am.
Right.
He's stuck.
Right.
He's like, I can't do anything. I vote and my guy gets like 5% of the vote. It's incredibly discouraging. It's just, you're almost better spoiling your ballot to try to prove a point to the other side to field a candidate that can there. And this is kind of what I talked about earlier, is that we need to stop in these very safe ridings in one side. We need to stop fighting with each other on the progressive side and just field a candidate that we both can agree on. And maybe, just maybe, they can flip it or put at least a contender to show, like in Peterborough, for instance, to show Ferrari that you're not as popular as you think. When we're united, we're 10 points behind you. We're 5 points behind you.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
it's like Boebert just experienced in Colorado.
Yeah. Like,
she thought she almost lost it. It now looks like she wants to run in the district next door,
which is
the
more
next
safer.
time around.
Yeah.
Because, which is safer.
Yeah. It's this is what I mean. This is why we need to kind of, as progressives, if we lose in 2025, which we probably will at this rate, it needs to be a regroup, because I don't think Pierre's going to get a strong minority. I think it's going to be a very weak minority, if at that. I don't think he's getting a majority, because I think Canada's smarter than that. But
Let's hope so.
If it's not enough to form a coalition, we need to take a step back and say, what are we doing? Right? How do we prevent this? And let Pierre implode, because he will. He will.
Mm-hmm.
Let him implode and be in the best position possible for the next election. Who knows? He may call a snap election and pull a Kim Campbell in 6 months. Right? And we don't know. We don't know. But to that person, I would say, I feel you. I've been in your shoes. My family's in your same shoes. It is tough. But stick to your values, stick to your roots, and just keep voting for who you want to vote for, because you can get the good feeling knowing that you at least voted for the person that represents you and what you want, right? Yes, the loud, aggressive person that's on TV all the time is saying something different that represents Peterborough, and Peterborough doesn't stand for this Trudeau government. But if you sit there and know, you know what, I didn't vote for you, you can give yourself a little peace of mind. I know it's a tough pill to swallow, but once you can kind of cope with that, no offense, it is incredibly warming, right? So,
okay, Mr. Grizzly, I'm just looking at the time. How are we doing?
Because of my illness, I am working from home today, so we can keep rolling.
Oh,
yeah. No,
cool. How are you doing for time, JV?
I'm good. I have a meeting at 11, so I don't think we're going to quite go to 11. So I think
we're not going to. Well, since we have you, then let's pick your brain a little more.
Sure.
At the state that we are now, about 19 months before a federal election, if you had advice, let's say for the three major parties, even though we don't really want to give Pierre any ideas, what would you advise them at this point?
NDP need a leadership review ASAP. The NDP need to, I've been saying this, I voted for it earlier this year. Jagmeet Singh needs to bow out. And I say that with the utmost respect for the man. I've met him a bunch of times. He's a nice guy. We agree on 95% of the things, right? I know he represents values that I align with. I voted for him. I wanted him to be my leader originally. But he needs to understand, as a lawyer, he needs to understand when the case is a loss, right? He needs to understand of when can I at least salvage anything I have for a political career. But if I know Jagmeet Singh, which I do, he's a fighter, and he's going to fight until he's punched right down to the ground. His brother was the same way, and that's why his brother's not an MPP anymore, right? He's just the way it is. It's just the way he is, and I love him for it. But and I said to him, like, I'm voting against you, and it's no disrespect. It's no disrespect to your values or who you are as a person. It's just I think we need to go down a different path. And somebody like a Matthew Green or Blake Desjardins, a young progressive voice that isn't about divisiveness. I've talked to them both. They're not about divisiveness. They're about helping. They're about, actually changing, Blake and who's the other guy in BC? Taylor Bachrach. Those two individuals in the NDP are wanting full election reform, full pharmacare, full like these things that like progressives want, but are doing it in a way that isn't divisive. Like they're doing it in a way that's encompassing. Like let's figure this out as progressives and then step forward. But that's what I would say for the NDP. For the Liberals, Justin Trudeau needs to get his ass in front of cameras. He needs to be in question period every single day. So the second that Pierre stands up, he's standing up after. And he needs to be fiery. He needs to be feisty. We needed a dark Justin for a little bit. Like we've seen the dark Brandon in the US with Biden. Yeah. He needs to, he's a boxer. He needs to put the gloves on, and it's time for him to fight because Pierre's going to continue this fight. But Pierre's failures is his ability to debate. And if you look at every time you see the clips roll around because Justin clapped back on question period, it's always like, yeah, that makes sense. And even some progressive conservatives are like, yeah, that was a good response. I have a video on my TikTok channel of Justin clapping back to when the online hate bill bullshit was going around, when Pierre was like, this is bad, before even seeing it. He clapped back. And I have conservatives in my comment being like, I'm not voting for Justin, but that was a good response. Right? This is the Justin we need. This is the Trudeau we need. He's been in power for 8 years. He'll be in power for almost 10 by the time we vote. Right? Yeah. He needs to fight, and he needs to fight now. And get your Sean Frasers in front of the cameras. Get your Felice Champlains in front of the cameras. Get your Goulds when she's back from mat leave in front of the cameras. Get these people that can debate and fight for you to fight for you and with you. And I think the best thing is that's just what Justin does. And get Sean Fraser in front of more built homes getting built. The more the Liberals are standing in front of development after development after development, 100,000 homes here, 50,000 homes here, 10,000 homes here. Next thing you know, we're going to get to that 1.3 million number very quickly. Right? And that's going to make a difference. Like I talked about, people are going to see that development in their communities. And in 19 months, that could change a voter. It's going to change me. Right? I'm seeing. Yep. Right? So, and for the conservatives, I just want Pierre to keep crying so my mug can keep getting filled back up over and over. Because
for people listening at home, JB has a mug on which it's written "Fascist Tears."
I need to relaunch this product. I used to sell this.
Is that a little sheep on the bottom?
Yeah, for when I used to be the Sheep King, but now I changed. I got to relaunch this because it was a very well selling mug back during the convoy. So it was I need to relaunch it. But no, Pierre, all I want Pierre to do is just keep talking. Not for content, not for sound bites, nothing. But he just needs to keep talk because he's digging his own hole here. Because once the campaign starts and the Liberals can see those holes, I think it's over for him personally. So,
all right, I'm gonna throw a fourth one your way actually because I'm really interested in this personally. What would you recommend for the Greens?
I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm the same thing when I'm thinking.
I think they need to redo their party. I think they can still call it the Greens. They can still go with the green message. I think that's important. They're going to have a hell of a fight coming up because climate change is here. We Paul and I were talking before you hopped on about how warm it is today in the start of March and how I normally go on a ski trip in the March break with my kid and my wife, right? We go skiing every March break. We're not doing that this year.
I was out without a shirt yesterday.
Yeah, like the mountain we go to announced they're closed for the season.
Without a shirt. Without a coat. Not without a shirt.
I mean, I would have believed you if you did it without a shirt too. Like it was beautiful. But like my mountain's closed this year. They just packed up for the season. They said, we're taking the L. We're not doing it this year. They're open one weekend. So like climate change is here. And the bigger picture, you got flowers blooming in Antarctica and you got things that we're seeing the signs of, massive climate change. So the Greens are going to have a position in fighting in government. They always will, because the climate change is always going to be a message. They got to shed their fiscal conservatism in their party. I think they need to go all in being a progressive party in some capacity. They got people in their party that are anti-abortion. They got people in their party that are, painfully fiscally conservative, but have a green message to it. They're kind of like a party without an ideology, and it's tough to place them. And I think they need to find their place. They need to find where they are in their with their candidates. And I think Elizabeth May has done a good job with that. You got Mike Morris at the provincial level that's done a good job with that. They can find, when they get a footing, they're good.
Yeah.
They're really good. It's just they can't.
They're good constituency MPs as well.
Yeah, they fight for their like. Every time I hear Elizabeth May talk, she's talking about Salish Gulf Islands. Like, it's the only thing that comes out of her mouth, and that's what I would want from an MP like Elizabeth May, right? Like, she's fighting for what represents her riding, and I love that about her. The Greens, just at a national level, I think the Greens should regionalize a party. Become a party of Vancouver Island, maybe some of these ridings that environmentalism is a little bit more important. Your Perry Owen Sounds, where there's a strong green candidate, right?
Right.
I think they should stop running in every riding and put all their money in on 10 ridings, 20 ridings, right? Just to try to like get that stronghold footing, kind of like what Ed Broadbent did with the NDP when that was starting out, right? Like, just target yourself in these key ridings and go from there. There's a comment in the chats that kind of makes me laugh. It's cons on bikes, which I would agree with the exception of Elizabeth May. A lot of Green Party people are conservatives that just are hippies, more or less, and are environmentalists, right? So they're not going to get the progressive vote because of that message, right? When people ask them, what's your stance on abortion, and they dodge the question, or what's your stance on carbon tax, and they dodge the question, right? So they got some rebuilding, like a lot of rebuilding, like and then the PPC can just die in a fire. That's kind of my thoughts on the PPC. They can just cease to exist.
Solid advice.
They can just cease to exist, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I'll take you up on that offer.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, at first I was happy when they came around because I was finally happy to see the votes, an opportunity for vote splits on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
But given it seems that the PPC more of what it's done, it's I don't know if this is true, but because I don't have the data to support it.
Mm-hmm.
But my impression is that people on the extreme right are much more willing to donate money than people on the extreme left.
Yes, it's true.
To political causes. So therefore, when you have the PPC coming along, and given that the CPC conservatives love money, they see money going the PPC way, that they think, hey, wait a minute, we used to be the only game in town. That's our money. And then they take a step to the right to coddle that. Whereas the liberals will work with more left if it has to, but really tries to straddle the red Tory vote more than, let's say, the orange liberal vote.
Yeah.
They think that there's more to gain there. They would rather politically manspread and occupy a wider swath of the center.
Yeah.
Than go. Whereas the conservatives will, so long as there's a PPC faction that's rabid and donating money, they'll just keep on taking another step to the right and to the right and to the right.
You say that, but then the PPC is holding campaign events in their basements.
Yeah.
It's like they don't even have enough money to book a hall, like to do their little rallies. Like, it was so freaking funny to me when I watched a live stream because Maxime Bernier was like live in whatever town he was in. I'm like, oh, is he going to be in a hall? I got my camera ready. I got my recording ready because I was going to record it for clips and stuff like that. And then the camera shows up and they're in a basement and there's an old lady handing out cookies like it's their mom, being like, okay, guys, have a little meeting. And there's 6 of them standing in a circle and Maxime Bernier rants about immigration for an hour. It's like, how can you take yourself seriously when you're in a man cave doing campaign rallies? So you say all these donors because they definitely have money, but I wonder where that money is going because they can't even afford a hall for rent in this riding that they're apparently a contender in. This was in like Manitoba when they had that by-election where they got second, right? Like the PPC has donors. I agree. Maxime Bernier is politically stunted. He's got controversy behind him. He's not ethically sound. So he doesn't stand a chance to be a federal leader because I think voters are going to see through that. But he's loud enough and he's racist enough that he can pull in 2% of the vote.
Well, people seem to forget that whole fiasco he had with his girlfriend, who was an exotic dancer who was connected to a motorcycle gang when he left top secret documents at her place.
Yeah.
Everybody seemed to forget about that. And I'm like, I don't forget about that.
That's why he's not in the Conservative Party anymore. He was a force to be reckoned with in the Conservative Party.
Oh, yeah.
Like he was slated to lead post
he was.
Harper. And then he left some papers.
He didn't lose by much.
No, he didn't.
He also didn't lose it by much, right? I mean, he was leading for the first, I think it went 13th rounds, and he was leading for the first 12.
Yeah.
And it was supply, because he stupidly went against supply management in Quebec for dairy, is what essentially did him in.
Yeah.
And then he famously lost his riding in Buse too. And that was the end of him. Right. So.
Yeah. And that was almost a guaranteed riding for life for him, because I believe his father was in politics
he's from that
represented
area.
that riding.
Yeah.
He's like political royalty in that area.
And if you want to talk about a conservative Quebec riding, you talk about Buse. Like, it's Conservatives, then PPC, then Liberals, but the Liberals are a distant third. Like, we want to talk about a safe conservative riding. It's that riding. So, like, best chance for him was in that riding. Right. But,
yeah. There's some rumors that going around that he might pull a Leslie Lewis and try to run in Saskatchewan next time.
He tried to run in Toronto Centre when they had their by-election. Like, what a joke!
Yeah,
like,
they was just trying to get a seat and get visibility, right? Free press.
He got like 40 votes. Like, he went to the most like progressive riding, and he's like, "I can do it." No, dude, get the hell out of here. I remember his
that was just free media.
I mean, my favorite thing I ever did, and I wish my friend forgot to hit record on the camera, but I was walking through a park in Toronto, and I saw that they were having a little PPC campaign event in the park during that by-election. I was like, perfect. So I went up to him. I waited because he was taking photos with people, and I stood beside him. He put his arm around me. I'm like, smile if you're fascist. And my friend forgot to take the picture.
Oh, shit.
He thought he pressed it, but he didn't because he was an idiot. And it was so funny. I never got shooed away from a group of people so fast in my life. I was handled and pushed out of the way. I'm like, it's fine. I got him to smile when he said fascist.
Jeez. All right. Here's one for you, because there's the kids have been asking me to speak about this, but I will try to find a way to link it to this conversation. Yesterday in France, there was a vote, and France, as a result of that vote, became the first country in the world to explicitly include the right to abortion in its constitution. According to the BBC, parliamentarians voted to revise the country's 1958 constitution to enshrine women's rights, guaranteed freedom to abort. The overwhelming 780 to 72 vote, not ambiguous at all, saw a standing ovation in the parliament in Versailles, where the result was announced. President Emmanuel Macron described the move as French pride that had sent a universal message. However, anti-abortion groups have strongly criticized the change, as has the Vatican, as expected. Abortion has been legal in France since 1975, but polls show around 85% of the public supported amending the constitution to protect the right to end a pregnancy. And while several other countries include reproductive rights in their constitutions, France is the first to explicitly state that an abortion will be guaranteed. It becomes the 25th Amendment to modern France's founding document and the first since 2008. Following the vote, the Eiffel Tower in Paris was lit up in celebration with the message, "My body, my choice." Before the vote, Prime Minister Gabriel Attal told Parliament that the right to abortion remained in danger and at the mercy of decision makers. Quote, "We're sending a message to all women, your body belongs to you, and no one can decide for you," he added. The article goes on, but what do you think? Because Emmanuel Macron and Justin Trudeau are pretty good friends, that Justin Trudeau could include that as a platform element in the next election, that he would enshrine abortion rights in our constitution.
I mean, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think it should be. I think not only does it need to be enshrined in our constitution, it needs to be more well-defined in the Canada Health Act. I think the Canada Health Act needs to be amended for a little bit more clarity of abortion, because it just takes one conservative premier to misconstrue what the Health Act says and not cover it anymore, right? So right. I think there's a lot of work still to be done on this issue. I think I'm going to say a statement that speaks in history about France. France confuses me. They are politically confusing, and they have been since Robespierre. It's been they're raising the retirement age to 67, which is very anti-progressive move, but then at the same time are enshrining abortion rights into their constitution. Like,
Right.
I'm confused with France, but they're also a centrist party right now. Macron is a painfully centrist individual. Like, he is like, if you did a political compass test, he'd be right in the middle. Like, he just doesn't venture off into any political ideology side. And I commend him for being able to stand firm on that centrist approach. I mean, it sets a precedent. France is a definitely first world country, one of the richest economies in the world, especially one of the richest economies in Europe. For them to set that message, especially in the EU as a whole, when you got a rising right movement in the EU,
Right.
for them to say, and they border Italy, and Italy just brought in that super far right person, within the
Giorgia Meloni.
family of Mussolini,
Who was just in town.
Yeah, knocking on the doors in Toronto. It's raised to 64. My apologies. It was raised to 64. My point is they're raising retirement age. But then you think about the progressiveness of France. Like, when you have a baby, they give you a nanny to live in your home. Like, I'm so confused with the way France does things, but it sets an amazing precedent in Europe. It sets an amazing precedent in the first world. And I hope more countries follow suit. I would love to see somebody like in England do the same thing, a little bit more conservative country, traditionally do something like that. I would love to see a Catholic nation do something like Ireland. Ireland has talked about enshrining not just abortion rights into their constitution, but LGBTQ rights into their constitution. This is Catholic Ireland. Catholic Ireland. And they got the blessing from the Pope to do that, because the Pope is actually super progressive right now in comparison. So when you got these countries that are traditionally a little bit more stuck in the mud starting to make these changes, that's intense, right? And I still need to kind of mull over the France thing, because I'm still trying to figure it out. I heard some critics saying it's stuck at 10 weeks, which is really early for a lot of people. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to get done. I think the fight doesn't stop just because it's in the Constitution. But I mean, it sets a lot of pressure for somebody like Canada. And then if Canada does it, it sets a lot of pressure for somebody like the US to do something, which the US is a whole different mess when it comes to abortion. But
even in the US, it's working, right? Because I believe there's been 15 in the United States. They have these things called ballot measures at the state level. That's where people get to come in and vote. And I think that there have been 15 ballot measures having to do with the right to abortion in the United States. And the Republicans have lost all 15. Like, even in Kansas,
Ohio,
they lost.
In Ohio, they lost. Like, the anti-abortion.
And in Ohio, they tried to change the rules of the game to actually raise the threshold. They said, we understand that for referendums, it's 50%. But before we have this referendum on abortion, let's have this other referendum, the referendum that says that for referendums, it actually has to be 60%. Just willingly give away 10 more percent of your power, people. To us.
Well,
to your betters.
If I know
to
anything
rulers,
about
like this. And then and the people said, no. And then they went ahead afterwards, and then in the abortion thing voted, we're keeping that.
Have you seen a ballot in the US elections? It is like, it's bigger than this. Like, it's huge, because if I know anything about US politics, they love ballot measures, and they'll put anything on a ballot measure. Anything. We want to wear red shirts on Friday. Okay, got to vote for that.
But they use that to bring people out, right? I mean, Bush the second won his second term by all the, anti same-sex marriage ballots. They put that on, and then we could do that. Okay, well then let's put some pro-marijuana stuff on the ballots. Now let's put pro-abortion, and all of a sudden now the Democrats are coming out. Right? Progressives are coming out. We don't have ballot measures, so
we have referendums.
And so that's why
even then,
we have referendum, but we don't have ballot measures specifically. And referendum, the government has to call it, whereas citizens can put a ballot.
I'm in the camp of make it a referendum in Canada. Simple. Put it as a 2025 referendum. Do you want to see abortion rights enshrined in the Constitution? Right? Do you want to see a framework put in place for putting abortion into the Charter of Rights and Freedoms? Right? And put it to the people, because I think it would pass, and I think it would pass very strongly. Maybe not so much in your deep blue conservative ridings, but in your Torontos, your Hamiltons, your Edmontons, your Vancouvers, that measure would do very well. And then you can kind of get a barometer check, right, to see where Canada is, because Canada's big. We're very spread out, and we have a lot of different views culturally in very different places, right? So it's hard. Like Ontario, living in Toronto, you can get an abortion at the hospital down the road.
Yeah.
But if you go to rural Alberta, good luck.
Well, same with New Brunswick. They just closed the last clinic.
Right.
The last private clinic.
Yeah. So we're very kind of all over the place, right? I think there's a lot more that we need to do in Canada before I think we make it a constitutional thing. I think we need to fix the healthcare part of it first and make access to safe abortion available for people. And they don't have to drive to another province to get it done or pay for it, God forbid.
It's healthcare.
It's healthcare.
It's healthcare. Period. Yeah.
It's healthcare, because people are going to do it regardless if they can do it safely. So
I mean, how many women died because of that? Back alley. For decades.
Yes, we've seen it. It happens. It's happened before.
The famous coat hanger, right? So
it's happened before. It'll happen again if we don't pay attention. The conservatives can make whatever law around it they want to try and prevent it and minimize it. People are still going to do it. So create a safe environment where it's done correctly in a medical establishment. It's like they didn't want to legalize cannabis for years. And I'm like, look, people are still going to do it. They don't even care about the penalty. They legalized it. And now what? Oh, look at that.
I literally have a cap still on my desk from the drink I drank the other night. Because it's like, it's just great. I can walk into a store and it's there. And there's people who know what they're talking about and can consult me and help me with my purchase. I'm not buying it from some sketchy dude in an alley in Toronto, or going to some sketchy apartment in the Heights in Kingston and buying cannabis.
And it's not laced with anything.
No, like that.
No, like story time quickly. Back when it was against the law, we purchased some from some sketchy place in the Heights in Kingston, which you would know where I'm talking about. And it was laced with PCP. Like, I thankfully didn't take any that night, but my friend burned a field down because he was high on PCP. Like, it's just like, what?
Wow.
Like, it's so I'm all for legalization of that. And I think we've created a safe supply, if we want to talk safer supply. And, drinking a drink or smoking a joint and going about your merry way at home, who are you hurting? Who are you hurting?
I watched an interview with Seth Rogen the other day and Ian Hanamansian on CBC. And he talked about how, it's like, because he has his own company in California. And he talked about how it's not all that legal in Canada. And I went, what is he talking about? And he brought up things like, well, look at all the places you can have alcohol. You can't purchase cannabis products in any of those places. You go to a hockey game, get a beer.
Right.
You can't get a buzz beer. I'm like, I never thought of it like that before. Now, I don't use it. I'm allergic to the product, so I can't. But I've always thought, you know what? You're throwing bad money trying to police a product that you cannot police. So let's just make it legal. We can tax it. We can control. We can have safe supply. People are going to do it no matter what. So let's do it in a safe manner.
Well,
and
to put it in perspective,
when he said that, it was interesting. I never thought of it like that before.
Yeah. To put it in perspective, a couple weekends ago, my friend had a bachelor party. My friend's getting married. I don't drink anymore. I've been sober for almost 600 days because I was an alcoholic. So I don't drink anymore. So talk about a triggering environment when I have 12 of my best friends at a bachelor party in downtown Toronto, right? That's like, I'm going to drink. So I thought, you know what? I'm not going to drink. I'm going to do some edibles and I'm going to enjoy my time a different way. So I did my edibles, and then we went to a Raptors game. Don't recommend, by the way, because Raptors games are incredibly visually stimulating environments, and I did not have a great time through a couple of the moments there. But my point is that I was able to enjoy my time with my friends. I was able to enjoy the game, and then we were able to go out after, and I was still in a good state of mind, and I didn't feel pressured to drink. And then when we all woke up in the hotel, I was the one up at 7:30 in the morning down getting breakfast. They didn't wake up till 11:30.
Yeah, because they're
It's like I was great. I went about my day. So like it's just the stigma around it is frustrating. And there's a bar, or not a bar. There's a cannabis store in Toronto that I used to go to. It's in Davenport, right on Bloor Street. And they have a very interesting setup. So the cannabis store is downstairs, and then there's stairs that go upstairs. And upstairs, they have a lounge. They have chairs, they have couches, they have TVs. And their goal is they've rented that space. They can't use it. They can't put anybody up there. But the goal is that if the legislation ever changes, they're ready to be that cafe that you can go and you can consume safely like a bar, right? And then you can go about your way and mosey on to where you need to go. And they're waiting. They're waiting. I think that's harmless. I truly think that's harmless, right? Is somebody... I don't know. I've never seen anybody fight somebody because they were high on cannabis. Or
it doesn't happen. It doesn't.
No.
And as somebody who worked as a nightclub DJ for decades, believe me, I've seen the violence that, comes with alcohol. And I'm a guy who likes a glass of wine. I like a glass of beer. I like a whiskey. I'm not an alcoholic, though. If somebody said, okay, you can't drink for the next 6 months, I'd be like, okay. It's not an issue for me, I can literally turn it on and off like that. And in the past, I've decided, well, you know what? I want to take a trip this summer, so I'm going to save some money. So I literally would not drink alcohol or dine out for 3 months and saved so much money. It was crazy.
Yeah. See, where I was an alcoholic, I was also a nightclub DJ. So I was surrounded by it. And I would drink my paycheck away.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
like I would be paid, I would get cashed out at the end of the night and they'd hand me $20.
Yeah.
Sorry, you drank your paycheck away.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, cool. Well, guess I had a fun night. And then I would return tomorrow night and do the same thing. Yeah. It was incredibly frustrating. And when you ever suffer from substance abuse or addiction, it is hard to shake. And finally, one day I woke up hungover after my birthday party. And I said, I'm done. I'm done. I stopped. I'm 600 days, almost 600 days.
Good for you.
Congratulations you on choosing you.
Yeah.
600 days, man. That's a good milestone.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. If you have a moment of I don't know, weakness, I don't know what label you want to put on, you decide you go out and you have a tear. Don't think of this as I've failed. It's just like I stumbled. Get back up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward.
Well, don't get me wrong. When we go out for dinner, I enjoy a glass of wine every now and then. Like I didn't stop drinking. I just stopped drinking to get drunk. So me having a glass of wine at dinner, I'm fine with that. Or maybe, it's a beautiful summer day. We're having some friends in the backyard here and I have a beer. Yeah. Right. Like that. But I don't buy enough to get me intoxicated. I buy enough for the event that I'm at. Right. That's kind of the control that I've been able to put in place for me. And then on those triggering events, like a bachelor party, I just do something else to help get me into a state of mind that was a great time. I had stories for life from that, because when you're the high brain versus the drunk brain, the high brain always wins. So I was the stable one. I was the one making the good decisions that night.
Right.
Reminds me of the scene from Animal House. So what you're saying is I could have an entire universe in my little finger.
Well, what I don't recommend is doing 20 milligrams of edibles and going to a Raptors game and then having t-shirt cannons launch t-shirts at you.
That sounds like a horrific moment.
Oh my God.
That was 5 minutes of torture. When I have t-shirts flying by my head at almost slow speed. I know they weren't going slow, but they felt like they were going slow. And I got 12 of my idiot friends laughing at me because I had my hood up and I'm like scourged down, like terrified.
I am so square. I have never been either that drunk or that high. Here's the thing. Since we're talking about,
I have a floodlight on the floor here to help light the background, my green screen, and Lola has her feet on it.
Warm.
It's hot. It's LED, so it's not insane. But I'm like, sweetheart, you're going to burn yourself. She's like, nah, I'm chill. Just doesn't seem to care.
Let's talk about that scandal that is not.
Oh,
since we have you,
let me grab my other notes from the other day. Let me just pull that up.
Yes, yes, because we talked about it on the show very briefly. But Pierre Poilievre, while they were in the House voting on pharmacare,
tabling,
he decided to leave the House to hold a press conference for which he was, I think, 45 minutes late.
Purposefully
showing up or something like that.
45 minutes late.
Everybody, come on! Please be there at 10:30. I'm gonna like, yeah. So I guess while the journalists were all there waiting for him to show him at 10:30, they weren't in the House covering what was going on there.
CPAC was turning on their cameras at 11 o'clock to cover the farmer care tabling.
So that's
And
why he showed up
started
late.
At 11:05. He
Counter
started talking.
programming. Yep. So we had counter programming. He basically rambled on a couple of things, took 2 questions, then had 4 other of his MPs ramble in front of the mic to basically make the same statement using different words but not adding anything new. So they all have something for their own clip files. Then came back and took 2 more questions. He only took 4 essentially that day instead of the standard 5, and then turned around on his heels and walked away. He had a big stack of papers. I don't know if anything was written on it or if it was a big stack of papers, Trump style.
Yeah, probably.
But basically claiming that this story that we've all known about since 2019, when the people involved were first escorted out of the building, until now, is this new thing and is this new scandal, which is, I'm talking about it in circles, but it's the Winnipeg lab thing. Let's talk about that. Why is this really not a scandal?
Well, we already knew about it. It was already something we knew.
Run.
I remember reading about it in 2021. I don't remember where I was, but I remember going to myself like, oh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
That's kind of concerning from a national security perspective, right? I'm like, oh,
Right.
that's not good, right? I never once thought, oh, this is Trudeau's covering it up, or this is some failure of the Liberal. I didn't even view it as a failure of the government.
No.
I viewed it as a failure of national security, which is military and police.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is the system worked. She
Mhm.
she was hired in 2003.
Under the
She
Harper government.
immigrated. She immigrated into Canada in 95 legally.
Yes.
She got her visa,
Mhm.
which means she would have passed a background check to get into the country. Right.
Right.
She was hired in 2003 and received her top secret security clearance. Great. So she passed all the checks. They interviewed her friends, interviewed her family, interviewed everybody around her, and everything was fine. She kept receiving those security clearances multiple times a year. I think you have to do it every 6 months or so in these top secret environments. Like you have to continually do it over and over and over again. And then she did what she did. Under Harper's years, by the way, she allegedly did it in 2014, right? That's when the first transfer of information happened. She was discovered. Well, she wasn't discovered. And then she was discovered later on. Subsequently lost her security clearance. Subsequently then was fired by the University of Manitoba that was employing her. And now she's potentially facing criminal charges that haven't happened yet, but could. It's like, it's not a scandal. It's something that happened that was concerning, that the system did what it was designed to do. Like, it sucked that it happened. And there's definitely an inquiry that needs to happen of how did this data leave a top secret center to eventually end up in China's hands.
Yes.
That's,
and it sucks that it took 5 years to detect it.
yes, definitely an inquiry needs to happen. I'm fully okay with an inquiry needing to happen, but it's not an inquiry that is a scandal of the government. It's an inquiry that's a scandal, if you want to call it that, of the lab system and the security system that around that, right? Questions for the University of Manitoba. It's like, how was this not discovered? How was this not noticed? Because University of Manitoba is staffing and controlling this, right? So
Right.
it's just not a scandal. And then for when the press conference was there, I remember I tweeted it out and I started in my politics group chat with all my people I went to school with. We were all trying to figure out what it was. Like, what is this? What is this? What is this? What is this press conference? Is he resigning or is there something happened? And then when he had the stack of papers, I'm like, oh, here we go. I knew it was going to be something. And then when you start talking about this lab, I'm like, the thing in 2019 that we already knew? Like, it was like, what? Like, and then it started to unravel and I thought, oh, they're doing pharmacare right now. Oh, this is that. And then they had the night before that came out that the person who received the ArriveCAN contract was actually a former conservative and PPC candidate.
Yep.
Like, all these things came out the night before, right? So it makes sense why they did it, but it's an easy thing because I think a lot of people, especially conservative voters, didn't remember this or didn't know that this happened. Right. So it was easy to just hold the stack of papers and go, look how bad this is.
Because it was just a few days story because the system worked as it should.
Yeah. Yeah. It was designed as it should. It was local news. It wasn't even really national news. It was, this thing happened. It's being dealt with. And if she gets espionage charges, she gets espionage charges. She'll get her day in court. The system will continue to work. right? She will have her
Yeah.
day, and she's not going to be deported because she's a citizen, so she's got to stay.
Right.
So there's really nothing more we can do. RCMP will investigate. They'll issue charges if they find anything to charge, and then she'll get her day in court. That's that.
Okay.
Right.
Now, his claim is that the fact that that stack of documents that he said was the documents that they are, that we don't know because, right, he never actually showed them to anyone. He said that those documents getting to him is something, a process that took 3 years. And he's saying that that's what the Liberals' cover-up was. But apparently there were attempts to make these documents public several times through committee work and all that type of stuff, and it was Conservatives that actually put the kibosh on this type of stuff.
Yeah, it's sort of the way I look at it is anytime we have sensitive information that needs to be made public for the interest of public interest, right? When we have something like this that should be made to the public as aware, like, hey, this happened, right? You need to know that this happened. And then you have to go through those documents and redact things that shouldn't be seen in the public. Maybe it's particular secrets. That takes time, that takes committees, that takes analysis, that takes years to get lawyer. You ever try to get a lawyer to do something in a weekend? Unless you pay them, they're not doing it very quickly. So I think the lawyers at the government and the retaining lawyers that they have aren't going to do things quickly. And I expect the government to take time to unclassify something, right? There needs to be a process. There needs to be a procedure. And for the Conservatives to say, no, we need it now is one, childish, two, disrespectful to the process that we have. You know, this is a party of law and order, yet they want to go around the law and the order. Like, it's just like, what are you trying to do? It's not a cover up that it took 3 years to declassify some documents. That's not a cover up. That's just the process. Like,
and you mentioned earlier also in a tweet that this was dealt with at NSACOP.
Yeah, it was already dealt with. Like,
yeah,
and they said they made their statement about it in 2019. Right, this happened.
Right.
This is what happened. We're looking into it. We've handed it off to CSIS and the RCMP, which they did, and they still say they're investigating, and there might be charges. Right, and not to mention that Harper and the Conservatives at that time were buddy with China. If we want to get a little bit more in deep about that. So the fact that it happened under the Harper years and we didn't find it under the Trudeau years, I think is a scandal in itself. Right? It's like, why wasn't this discovered in 2014 when it happened? Why did it take 5 years and a different government and a different attorney general to discover this kind of thing? Right?
Right.
So
that was my question too. When I sat there, wait a minute, isn't it the real scandal that this happened under the previous government's nose at the same time that FIPA was being negotiated?
Yeah.
After Harper swallowed himself whole on being tough on China.
Remember,
he didn't go to the opening ceremonies of the 2008 Olympics because he wanted to teach China a lesson. And then when he finally got there, he got basically pantsed in front of everyone by the chairman. You know, basically, belle heure pour arriver. So, oh, you finally decided to show up, did you? Pretty much. Because, and then all of a sudden, we're entering FIPA and we're selling, you know, gas companies to China.
There is a theory that I live with in life, and I like to say, where there's smoke, there's fire. And whenever I see Pierre stand in front of a camera and repeat straight up lies about whatever's going on in the world or in Canada, and you know, time and time again, it's a deflection away from what is actually going on, like this fake scandal. And then, of course, we had, you know, all these things come out the day before with the ArriveCAN contract going to a Conservative, and you know, pharmacare, which was you know, 85% approval rating in Canada for pharmacare, by the way. Very popular bill. Very popular among Conservatives. People want this, right? And, you know, it's a deflection away. And I said this in a video. If the Conservatives had nothing to worry about, like we just watched a by-election, 30 points, right? If they were cruising their way into a majority, why would they be making up all these scandals? Why would they be making all these controversies? Right?
Yeah, you'd save that for the election.
Save it for the election.
Guess you needed it.
Or just not even do it. Just say coast. Like I use this. I use this with The UK. I use the UK as an example. Flip situation. Conservatives there, extremely unpopular. Labour slated to win in a super majority landslide next election. By-elections are happening, and Labour is flipping Conservative safe seats. Right? There is a clear indication that the Conservatives are in shambles. And what are the Labour Party doing? Nothing. They're sitting there. They're coasting. They're like, we know we're going to win, right? We're just going to address things as they come up, and we're just going to wait. We're asking for an election to be called, which they're not going to do, but they're asking for an election to be called, and that's that. The Conservatives are doing leadership party reviews. So that's a situation where there's a clear divide about where the country's direction is going. But in Canada, you wouldn't know the Conservative Party is leading by 20 points because they're campaigning every day. Right. That's kind of my thought on this. It's like, why are you so heavily campaigning?
So are you thinking that there might be something in their internal polling numbers that are indicating that they're not as solid as that we really are in a kicking the tires phase, and that Pierre is just a placeholder?
On both sides, on the Liberal side too. Why would Justin Trudeau visit a by-election that he was slated to lose by 30 points, which they ended up losing by 30 points? But I think that's because of turnout, not because of actual popularity. Why would the Prime Minister of the country go to a Conservative safe seat to try to flip it? Why did he pay that visit? Why are the housing minister not only announcing all these housing initiatives, but also doing campaign stops and stopping in these key ridings to try to talk to voters? Why is Pierre hosting rally after rally after rally after rally to try to convince voters to vote Conservative when there's not even an election? This is what I mean. When there's smoke, there's fire, right? And public polls are one thing, but polling 1,000 people from coast to coast, asking them how they're going to vote, I don't think that's an indication. But if you poll 10,000 people in the GTA, and you're going to get a better picture about what the 905 is looking like. And I think both the Conservatives and the Liberals have done that. And there's data to show that they're not winning the 905. There's data to show that the Conservatives are not going to win Quebec. And I would be terrified as a Conservative at that if I saw those numbers, because you need both.
Right.
You need both.
Right.
So.
Right. Okay. Speaking of the ArriveCAN app, because on that day we found out, as they're trying to make a big deal about that, because their argument that it was only supposed to cost about $60,000 or $80,000 turns out not to be true, because the CBSA had their projections with everything else that was needed other than just developing the platform. And turns out that they were saying about $55 million the entire time, and it came in just $1 million over budget. And then there was an extra $5.8 million for something that nobody had predicted that was needed. And
during a pandemic,
we found out during a pandemic, exactly. And then we found out that one of the contractors, because basically the Conservatives' big line is this: 2 people working in their basement or their garage, whatnot, who don't even do any programming, got the contract, and which is not rare. Sometimes a company gets the contract to manage the whole process, and then they go out and hire subcontractors to get it done. And the reporting started focusing on this one person. I believe his name is David Yeo, who turns out was an employee of D&D on the civilian side, and he owned a company called Dalian Enterprise, which received a contract for $7.9 million to do work on the ArriveCAN. Well, today in the news, according to the CBC, that company, Dalian Enterprises, has received more than $200 million in government contracts since 2015. Now, I don't know why they didn't go back earlier than 2015.
I know why.
To see if there was any. I mean, this is CBC. To see if how long the history. They just started the clock at 2015. The documents were filed in. That's why. I just found out. The documents were filed in response to an order paper question from Conservative MP Dan Moyes. They list contracts awarded to Dalian from each government department between November 2015 and November 2023. So, basically, a Conservative MP made a request starting only from the time that the Liberals. That, to me, is a red flag.
It gets deeper than
right
that.
There.
It gets deeper than that.
Yes, because when you start, again, one of these things that I keep on saying on the show is that it's very interesting to spin something when you get to decide when history begins.
Yeah.
So as they set the clock back to 2015, oh my God, it's scandalous. This guy didn't only receive $7.9 million in contracts from the Liberals, they received $200 million from the Liberals. Okay, now let's see if Dalian Enterprises existed in 2006.
They did under a
And how
different
much it
name.
got from 2006 to 2015 under a different name, which was what Jennifer O'Connell and the MP was trying to table some papers in the government when they were called Cordell,
Something like that.
I think it was
Yeah.
before.
They
something
did
like
a corporate name change in 2014.
Yeah, and they were asking for unanimous consent for her to. She needed unanimous consent from the House at the time to be able to table those documents that showed that the Conservatives had contracted with that company, and well, there were a few Conservatives in the House at the time that said no, so therefore that consent was not granted. But yes, please tell us about the pre-2015 days, if you would, good sir.
So this company changed their name in 2014 to the name we now know. They existed a long time before that. And they received contracts from the conservative government at the time, specifically for transportation infrastructure, IT transportation infrastructure, under the Ministry of Transportation, Minister of Transportation at that time, who was Pierre Poilievre. So it's like, so
oh, this is classic.
when you go back, when you just dig a little bit, and Matthew Green, the fantastic NDP member of Parliament, did this digging where he went back, looked at the corporate name change, then looked at all the government contracts prior under that old name, because this is all public information. You can look this up on the internet, right? And it was only about a couple million, but still a couple $1 million is a couple $1 million, right? To build some sort of transportation IT infrastructure. Back in around the Pierre Poilievre transportation minister era. So, I talked about this. I put it in a video. People have talked about this, but the problem is the CBC and all these mainstream guys are stopping at that 2015 line. They're not going back to the bigger picture. And why do you think the Conservatives are so in tune with how this company works if they never talked to them before? They know exactly what this company does. Right? The two guys living in a basement, they knew exactly what it was because they've used them before. It's not some secret for them. And this whole ArriveCAN thing, like you said, 2 seconds, I found the CBSA document dated in 2020 of the budget being this $60 million that they were anticipating. And anybody who knows app development knows that hearing $80,000 for an app like ArriveCAN, you scratch your head and you go, wait a minute, only 80 grand? That's cheap. That's cheap for an app. For an app that's supposed to take our passport information and our sensitive health records and store that and then provide it to the border agent, that's going to cost a couple million. I'm sorry. I still think 60 million is a little extreme. I do want an inquiry to see why this was so expensive. But at the same time, from a technical and IT perspective that I look at that and go, okay, we're dealing with sensitive information. We're dealing with privacy. We're dealing with, and then everything you do in English, you have to do in French because it's, we're a bilingual country, which costs money to translate. These are things that have cost to it. When I worked for a company that starts with R, that also is the color red, we had to build out infrastructure at the store level for an IT thing that I was working on a project on. And this was internal. This was not being presented to the public. This was because we were storing people's ID information and sensitive credit information. This cost that company $25 million to build this system out. And this was an internal private system. So it makes sense. I think about it and I go, this all makes sense. It's a government system that is collecting foreign nationals' passport information. I want that to be stored. I don't want that to be leaked. And imagine the controversy that if the Liberals cheaped out on ArriveCAN and it was some cheap $80,000 app and then there was a data breach. Imagine the controversy about that. Right? Imagine if there was a data breach of everyone's vaccine information and passport information, not just Canadians, but foreign nationals as well that were entering the country. Imagine both the national security concerns with that, but also the controversy. How loud would Pierre be yelling if there was a huge data breach when ArriveCAN because the Liberals didn't spend enough money to make it secure? That's kind of my thought on that. So
Well, gee, I mean, a car just going boom on the other side of the border got him to go into the House of Commons and accuse the Prime Minister of not, doing everything he could to keep people safe. He's doing the same thing, with, Iran on the downing of the flight because Iran won't cooperate. Again,
Yeah.
not keeping Canadians safe. So, and again, even the thing with the lab, he's trying to spin it as China got access to some bioterrorism type
He
stuff
said it twice.
from like this. So the Prime Minister's not keeping Canadians safe. So if there actually were a data leak, like something true, a kernel of actual truth, like he would be on every rooftop screaming it.
Yeah.
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 If you go, see.
There's no. So, like I said, I think that $60 million is expensive. It's a lot of money. We would all wish we had $60 million in our bank account, right? Definitely some questions. I want an inquiry. I'm okay with oversight. I think oversight needs to happen in government to make sure we're not spending too much money on A or B, right? And what were the other offers? What was this? Like, let's look at this. Let's break this down. But if the inquiry comes out and you got all these IT guys come forward and say, no, 60 million is good. 60 million is good, right?
Hey.
Oh, Lola. But yeah, like this is the forecast, and then this is the actual. And for a government contract to be $1 million over forecast,
That's incredible.
that's pretty good. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really good, actually.
It's really good. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't happen ordinarily. That, I mean, $1 million difference, that's peanuts in the grand scheme of things. Is $1 million a lot of money to me and you? Yeah, it is. But when it comes to a government contract, that's actually really good.
So if I can just address a comment real quickly, because Toronto Dan actually makes a really good point. No offense, but people flying during the pandemic shouldn't have happened. It's the stupidest thing. And ArriveCAN shouldn't have been a thing. I get that. And in a normal world, I would have agreed with you. But unfortunately, there's circumstances that come up that are unexpected. I unfortunately lost my grandfather during the pandemic, not because of COVID, separate issue, but he passed away. His wishes were his ashes to be spread in Ireland, where he's from. So we had to make those arrangements. We needed to, this was height of the pandemic. This is like late 2020, no vaccines yet, right? We had to travel. We had to travel not only during a pandemic, but with human remains, which is incredibly complicated to do, I must add. It was a lot of paperwork. It was a lot of stress, but we were able to rest my grandfather where he wanted to be rested. And when we returned to Canada on an empty flight, I was on a wide body plane with 6 of us on this flight flying across the ocean. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, this was necessary. I needed to do this for my family. We couldn't have a normal funeral in Canada because of the restrictions and whatnot, but this was an important thing for us to do for my family at that time. So, and I'm not trying to argue with Dan or anything. I know what he meant, but I just wanted to address that. There was situations that we needed to do that. And sure enough, when I landed back in Canada in Toronto, I had to use ArriveCAN. And it was amazing. Like, I loved it because I didn't have to talk to anybody.
They keep on saying it's a failed app. It's not a failed app at all. It's freaking
anybody who's used it says the same thing, right?
Like, the kiosks in Toronto are annoying. I'll give them that. Toronto Pearson is a hell of an airport, but it is. I gave my QR code. I scanned it in the machine. They printed out this form, and I talked to some person, and he put a sticker on my passport, and I was on my way. It was. Thanks welcome back. Welcome
Let's dig into that for a minute or two, shall we? Because I have friends who work for CBSA. Now, those kiosks that we have used to be people.
They did? I think I still have.
They used to be people. So now they're being replaced with machines, which, give it 5 more years and how many people will CBSA have employed at a passport office in, like a point of entry, I should say. 1 or 2,
They already do. I re-entered the country. I went to Cuba around this time last year, and we re-entered. And when we landed in Toronto at like 2 a.m, like we were landing with all the Pacific flights, right? We were filled with jet lags, and we scanned our QR code from ArriveCAN, and the gates opened, and we were welcomed back into the country. I took a pan to my left where all the old border guards would be, with all the booths. There's like just 3 of them working. Yeah. There was just 3 of them. And they were dealing with the people who couldn't use ArriveCAN if like you needed to get a visa or some sort of very particular immigration reasons. But the booths are empty. And if you ever fly into Toronto Pearson, there's like 60 booths when you get to that. But it's huge. It's massive. It's a massive room, and it's always super intimidating. And as somebody who's traveled a lot, having family overseas, I like the fact that I can use an app and a QR code.
Here's the other thing too. Like, I mean, I'm kind of in a strange situation when it comes to this, because I hate to see people lose their jobs, but at the same token, sometimes you've been traveling for X number of hours, you're jet lagged, you're coming home, and then they ask you these questions, and you're like, because you're exhausted physically, emotionally, you desperately need a shower, a bite to eat, and 12 hours sleep, and they're asking you questions that sometimes you stumble when you answer them, and it's like, okay, you got to go to secondary. Come up to that machine, just tell it what it asked you, and you're on your merry way.
Yeah, I know my charter rights, so I know that they cannot refuse entry to a Canadian citizen re-entering their country, and I know that information. So when I'm getting off a transatlantic flight, or God forbid a trans-Pacific flight in Toronto at 2 a.m. or whatever, or wherever the time, I was the rudest. I'm not a rude person. I'm generally a kind person, but like I was not nice to those people, but I had no reason to be. I was just, like you said, I was jet lagged. I was tired. I needed to eat food that wasn't on a paper little tray, and I needed to shower, and I wanted to get home after a long trip. So the fact that I can push a button on a machine and it takes my picture, and I'm just as we walk through, I'll take that any day.
And that's where I say, I'm on the fence about it. It's like, I like that aspect of it, because when you're exhausted and when you've been traveling for if you've been on a 7 or 8 hour flight, and I can't afford to fly business class because it's outrageously expensive. So, I'm 6 foot tall, about 190 pounds on a good day, 180, 190, it depends. And I sit in those seats, and I do not have a big arse. I've got my 32-inch waist, and I have about a centimeter on either side of my hips, and my legs are cramped in, and my height is in my torso, not my legs, and yet my knees are still 1 inch 2 centimeters from the seat in front of me. And you've been like that for 8 hours, and when I get off, you can barely walk, because I'm 55 years old, so it's a little bit more difficult when you've been sitting like that for 8 hours. And you walk in, and you got your stuff, and you're hot and sweaty, and you're covered in airplane film, and you just want to get the hell out of the airport and get to where you're going to take. Like, the first thing I do is walk in and shower. The very first thing I do. So, when you are exhausted like that, dealing with, and oftentimes the CBSA personnel, they've had a rough day. They might have had a flight with a bunch of horrible people on it. So their humanity has been affected by it too. They could be at the end of a 12-hour shift. So there's a whole combination there that can be really kind of terrible. So when you have the opportunity to go to a machine, the machine does what you need it to. It's kind of nice.
I landed in Toronto once. The flight in front of me was a flight from Nigeria. So we were in line with a mixture. This is before the kiosks and apps and stuff. So it was a mixture of Canadians and Nigerians. Now, love Nigerians. They're amazing people, amazing culture. But visa-wise, it's complicated, right? They don't get visa on entry. They have to get it in advance. So when I got to the border guard and I put my Canadian passport down, I could literally see the sigh of relief just hit her face as she just scanned it, gave it back to me. Not a single question. Yeah. Just like, I could be bringing in drugs, and she could have been like,
just exhausted and didn't care.
Yeah. Pro tip though, real quick. When you're flying long, you can go to any airport lounge and buy your access. So you don't need a special credit card. You don't need anything. True. You can go in and be like, what's your hourly rate? It's usually about $20, $30. And you can shower.
No, not that one. Hang on.
You can get drinks, you can get food, and then you could just leave. And I always, every time I fly long haul.
Just a sec. I haven't turned your mic up. Sorry.
Oh,
sorry, guys.
I shower before I go into on the plane. It's the best feeling, freshly showered, getting on an airplane.
Yes.
Like,
So I have to apologize for interrupting, but Paul has to go to a medical clinic now. Oh, you're done.
Oh, okay. The telehealth has told me to get to the clinic and get checked out right away. I could have walking pneumonia, so.
That's me being bossy. But I'm like, we have to mask up, we have to get rapid tests, and we have to go to a medical clinic and wait for hours. So,
Oh,
not to
sweet.
share personal information, but he's got to go.
Okay, babe. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much for keeping our Mr. Grizzly in good health.
And I hope you feel better too, Douglas.
I am feeling
I'm
much
really
better
glad.
today.
Good.
Yes. I sure you can. There's only like a little bit of congestion that you can
Okay,
hear, but
I'm
other than
glad.
that,
Want to see what's going on with her?
Oh, saucy. Yes, the whip is cracking.
I love it. I love it.
Sometimes you have to be bossy.
All right. Well, kits and cubs, we've been told.
Okay, bye.
JB, thank you so
Anytime.
much for joining us and giving us a lot of insight. There was a lot of details about those smaller stories that I wasn't fully aware of, which that whole thing about um, former Dalian having the contracts from Transport when Pierre was actually the minister. It's like, oh, I missed that part.
I'll send you the
so I'm going to
documents
be
so
going.
you can look at them.
Yes,
But
please do. Yes, and I will be going to your channel and catching up on a few episodes.
Yeah.
Please tell the kits and cups where it is that they can find us and find your good work. Find you and find your good work.
Many different things, exciting little things to do. So Canadian Politics 101, you can search it pretty much on any social that you can imagine. It'll pop up. I do a show, not daily or weekly, as things happen, which is a beautiful way to do a show. You don't have to worry about trying to rush a show at the end of the night. When something happens, I have enough to talk about. I talk about it. So Canadian Politics 101, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, all that stuff, you'll be able to find it. I recently just launched a creator union-driven network called Polaris Media. So we are actually growing and building out a media network with people, and it's going to be entirely union-based, creator-based. So when we all make money, everybody makes the same. So we're growing. We have a bunch of creators that are joining on in the next few weeks. So that's super exciting. I'm doing a TED Talk in May in Grand Prairie, Alberta for a basic income. You can get tickets for that in all my bios if you're in Grand Prairie and you wanted to check it out. There's still tickets, very limited, but they're still there. So that's kind of what I got coming up. And I'm going to be a dad in June. So that's
awesome.
Yay.
That's all the things that are happening for me this year.
That's a lot of things.
That's a lot of things.
Yeah, it's busy.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on our show. I know that our viewers and our listeners always appreciate you.
Anytime.
And we will have you back. And basically, thank you for offering, actually, because you're like, hey, you want to talk about Durham?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I figured it was the appropriate time to reach out and be like, let's talk.
Absolutely.
Great. Yeah, you're always welcome here.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me. Anytime.
All right.
Appreciate
Take care, brother.
Have a great day. Bye. All right, kits and cubs, that's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope that you love listening to us because we love making this for you. Remember that sharing is caring and word of mouth is priceless, and you have the mouths from which we want the word to come, so please tell your peeps and poops all about us. If you do not want to miss an episode, you do not have to, thanks to the Ray Girl. If you scan that QR code that's right under my chin, that will bring you to our Podpage site. And if you are listening, that is podpage.com/The True North Eager Beaver, lowercase letters with a hyphen between each one of those words. And if you click subscribe there, when we have something fresh off the bandwidth, we will get it to you as soon as possible. We're a little behind on getting some podcasts up, of course, because Mr. Grizzly's not feeling well. And before I wasn't feeling well, and I didn't get all the descriptions to him in time. But we are working on that. But health comes first, self-care comes first. So there will be a little delay in getting some episodes out and description updates and all that kind of stuff. But if you are patient with us, it will happen. Do not worry. If you would like to support us in other ways, that QR code by Mr. Grizzly's head brings you to our YouTube page where we encourage you to come and watch the show so you can participate in the chat with the entire damn fam, which is the best damn fam in all of podcasting. Registered trademark. And while you're there, why not play with our buttons? Like, share, subscribe, click on all three, click on one, click on two. We don't care. We don't judge. You just let your freak flag fly. We just appreciate being clicked. And if you would like to support us in other ways, the QR code that is now appearing over Mr. Grizzly's head brings you to our coffee page, where you will find the Eager Beaver Lodge Emergency Hydration Fund, where Caesar coffee, hot chocolate, and Guinness await us to act as our staff so that we can get this show prepared for you. And someone scanned the QR code. Thank you, you lovely, lovely, lovely soul. So if you go there and you can drop a couple of toonies or loonies there, we would really, really, really appreciate it. We do have some appreciation to give, but we'll do it on another show, and Mr. Grizzly does not have to go. But everything is appreciated. Thank you so very much. Because democracy is something that you do, for those of you who voted in the Durham by-election, please take a day off, because rest is important. For everybody else, please put pen to paper and write those letters. A handwritten letter goes a long way. As we recently seen, certain Canadians have done that and have raised some very interesting questions about how money is raised and how money is spent and where money goes. If you have something that you're wondering about and want to ask a question, write a letter. Or something displeases you, write a letter. Or better yet, give a call to the constituency office and ask for a meeting. Got to put your body in the game. All right. From the Beaver Lodge, this is your eager beaver saying it could be a tough world out there, so please be kind to and gentle with yourself. And if you are feeling a little under the weather, please practice some self-care if you do have that option. Mr. Grizzly, some words of wisdom, please.
I don't really have words of wisdom, but I do have a picture of a sleeping dog.
So cute.
She's really
She's
settling
so-
in quite well.
She loves you.
We've had her for a total of 14 hours, and she's very much at home. So I'm very happy.
She
about that.
loves you. I saw those licks.
Oh yeah.
Those puppy kisses.
And I do have one more thing I want to share, and then I'm gonna roll the credits. This is Michael DeAtter's cartoon for March 5th, 2024. I'll put this on the screen and read it out to you. For those of you listening, it is a statue of Brian Mulroney. And underneath the statue on the podium, it says, Mulroney prioritized the environment, stood against apartheid, championed free trade, opposed Russia, globalist. And Pierre Poilievre is walking by eating an apple, saying, another radical woke agenda. Which I thought, Yep. Because he stands against all of those things.
All of those things, yeah. If Mulroney were actually campaigning, Pierre would have torn a strip off.
Yeah.
So before I tell you to cue the rooster, Kits and Cubs, if you are not watching The Briar this year, you are missing out. You really should be watching. The matches are not going as expected. There are tons of upset. The team from the Northwest Territories is got 4 victories and 1 loss. People keep on asking, why do we have the territories? This is why. PEI is doing well as well. Team Canada lost an interesting match. Kevin Cooey, who is won it 4 times, is not performing as well as expected. There's a lot of interesting matches. So and the team from Northern Ontario as well is doing very well. So if you've never watched curling before, this is a good time to get into it, because something very interesting is happening on the national scene. All right, Mr. Grizzly, please cue the rooster. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music. I'm just, no Easter egg, just sending you off with wishes for good health. I hope that they find what something is wrong and are able to get you on the course to some treatment to get you better, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Big hugs.